Hello, and welcome to my pitch for why your school needs block scheduling. To start off, I'm going to go into why traditional scheduling um, has some problems that come along with it. And one of those is that maybe you don't have enough time to cover all materials. I know personally, when I'm teaching, the 45 minutes or 50 minutes per class, it always seems like I'm trying to fight against the clock, that I don't have enough time to get all the things that I wanted to get to, or if there's something that comes up during class that kind of stops things. I feel like that the time that I'm going against things is the hardest thing about being a teacher. You're always going against the clock. So having double the time or around that goes a long way to helping take a lot of stress off teachers, and it helps you get everything done that you want during class. And one of those things is like the time to devote to large projects. It always seems like that during class at 45 minutes, you kind of have to take all the fun things out of the class in order to get the information you need to teach. Which is a shame because those fun activities and those hands-on activities are really what helps the students more than anything learn the material. But it always seems like that you just don't have enough time to add that stuff in, and you end up making the class a little bit more boring and not as interesting for the students. So having a lot longer class period goes a long way to help that. The next two really kind of go together in a way. The classes aren't synced and you get interruptions. By like classes not synced, what I mean by that is that you may have 4 to 6 classes a day, and there may be an interruption that happens during those classes where one class is behind all the other ones. It could be a fire drill. It could be just having to speak with a student, disciplinary problems, things like that. But it's not too uncommon an occurrence that you'll have 1 or 2 classes that are behind and a couple classes that are ahead. And sometimes this might not be a problem, but if you want to have a certain testing done, or if you're trying to get things done before spring break, all sorts of things like that, what you end up doing as a teacher is you end up holding the other classes back a little bit so that the other ones can catch up, which really isn't a good thing to do either. You're not helping push them forward. You're kind of saying, well, we're just going to have today be a study hall day or something like that, which does not help at all in order to get classes caught up. So having longer classes, you have a lot more time where you can, if you have to, you can squeeze more information into a 90-minute class and you can't for a 45-minute class. And the last one, the problems with traditional scheduling are warm-ups and cool-downs. I kind of talk to this as like when students are just coming into class and they're a little bit rowdy, you're trying to get them settled down in their seats, trying to get conversations to end, or maybe you're just talking with them. It's always good as a teacher to actually communicate with your students, have a relationship when they come in. And that could take 10 minutes of class right there. And then cool downs would be things like you're slowing down the material, you're kind of closing things up. Students are putting books away, they're putting papers away, they might be cleaning up. They might even be looking at the clock, 5 minutes left, and they're kind of getting antsy. There's a lot that can happen starting class and ending class that really cuts into the schedule for the lessons. And if you have a 45-minute class, 15 minutes might be for warm-ups and cool downs. That's a third of your class where students are just talking among themselves or putting things away that you're losing your lesson time. So if you have a 90-minute class, those 15 minutes aren't as critical to lose. In fact, you might actually use those 9 minutes to set aside some time to actually just talk to students and see how they're doing their day-to-day lives, which can go a long way. Now, you might be wondering, what is block scheduling? So block scheduling can be so many different types of things. These here are the 3 that I believe are the most common. Alternating, 4x4, and mixed. They can go by different names. Some people have their own way of creating a block scheduling, but I'm just going to focus on these 3 right here as they're the most common. So alternating block schedule comes sometimes called the AB block schedule, or day 1, day 2, or odd and even. Basically what it is that their classes are broken up. They alternate throughout the week. So for instance, in this one right here, a student might have their English class on Monday, and then the next day they'll have band. And then on Wednesday, they'll have English again. And it kind of alternates back and forth. And sometimes it might not do that. This one, in the middle of the day, they have all different classes every day. But it can really be however you want it to be with this sort of alternating block schedule. But it's one of the most common ways to do it. Another one is called 4x4 scheduling. This one is where students have the same classes every day. So rather than doing that alternating where they might have English one day and then science the next day, this one they'll have science or English all day or every day of the week. But their classes will end halfway through the year. So for one half of the year, they might have this English class. And then for the next half of the year, they'll have history class. There's still 90-minute sessions, but you will end this class half the way of the year, and then you'll start this one the next half of the year. You could do these with certain, math classes might go together, maybe Algebra 1, Algebra 2, or, World History 1, World History 2. That's a common thing to do. That is 4x4 scheduling. Mixed scheduling is kind of, this really shows you that block scheduling isn't a set idea. Mixed scheduling is one way where you can kind of mix and match things and kind of make it the way that you want it to be for your school, what works best. So you might have classes that are still 45 minutes on certain days, and then you might have classes that are 90 minutes other days. You could have it where this could be your core classes, your English, science, math, and social studies could be on these days, and then these days could be art or foreign language, anything you want. You could even, have some 90-minute classes on one day, in the same day as your 45-minute classes. Just depends on what your students need and what is the best way to get to them. But this really shows these mixed schedules is that block scheduling can be made to fit your needs rather than you have to either go all in or not at all. So it's a really good way to show that block scheduling can kind of fit any school however they want to have that work. So not everybody loves block scheduling. There's a lot of people who have criticisms for it, a lot of people who don't like the way it goes. And that's what I'm going to focus now with this presentation is that even with these criticisms, there's a lot of responses to these criticisms. And we'll go into that right now. One of them is teaching time. So one of the criticisms is that you might have actually less time with your students depending on how long your normal classes were. So like in this instance, they're talking about if your class is normally about an hour or 55 minutes, switching over to 90 minutes you'll actually lose time with your students. Now, personally, I'm not familiar with classes that go usually an hour. I'm sure there are plenty of them. I'm used to classes that are about 40, 45 minutes. In those cases, you will be getting the same, if not more, time with your students. But this is a problem. If you already have an hour with your students, perhaps it's best just to keep that traditional schedule. Otherwise, again, see what works best. Even losing a little bit of time, you're still getting more time with your students in that way. Another one is that students might not have attention span for over an hour. One here is some adolescents can barely pay attention for 15 minutes. How are they supposed to concentrate for 90 minutes? And that could be a criticism right there. If you're doing a straight lecture as a teacher in your class for an hour and a half, I doubt that there's many adults that are going to be able to stay awake during that time. But we'll kind of go into what you should be doing with those 90 minutes rather than just lecturing. And these responses right here. So even kind of just going to that last one, while people may be concerned with the attention spans, it's what the teacher does with that time that matters. And that's really the most important part. When you're getting 90 minutes with your students, it's best not to spend that time straight lecturing, right? You have an hour and a half. This is a lot of time where teachers can really do some really good learning. And we'll go into a lot of that later. And also having more time in your classroom allows a teacher to have intervention time with the students. They could even set aside 10 minutes during the class time to have a one-on-one conference with each of their students, new student every day, just to see where they're at, just to talk about how they're doing and any concerns that student might have. Getting that 90-minute block, it's much easier to fit that in than having that 45-minute block where you feel like you're already struggling against the clock. There's a study of a survey from schools from Virginia that switched and actually said there's a lot less disciplinary problems. And one reason for that might be that because of the fewer classes, that's fewer times in between class. If students have 8 classes each day, and there's like 5 minutes per each class where they move between their lockers and then to the next class, that's about 40 minutes a day. The students are just in the hallways. If you go on to a block scheduling, you're going to cut that in half. So that can be a way that you can actually reduce disciplinary problems in your school by having students less in the hallway and more in the classroom. So that's something also to look at too. So another criticism that people have are student transfers. If you have a block schedule in your school and you're transferring a student in that's from a traditional school, or if they're in a block schedule and they're transitioning to a block schedule or to a traditional school, they might have missed half a year of material, or they have to take the same class over again because it's this type of block scheduling. This is a really simple response to this one, and honestly, students that transfer in the middle of the year are going to struggle fitting into where they left off anyways. Not all schools countrywide are going to be at the same place at the same time. A lot of students mix things up. Teachers themselves have to figure out what's the best way to approach a subject, and not everybody's going to agree on that. So really the response to that is that whether a school has block scheduling or traditional scheduling, students that transfer in the middle of the year are going to be lost for a while anyways. However, there is an advantage when it comes to student transfer with block scheduling, and that's that students can make up work faster. If your student goes from a traditional school and goes to a block scheduling school, they're going to be able to catch up quicker because the classes are going to be a lot more compact. Excuse me. And it's not going to be as much of a problem than if they went from a block school to a traditional school. It's going to go a lot slower for them, especially for like a 4x4 school where they're doing an entire year's worth of a class within half a year. That can help them move incredibly fast in catching up on their work. Also, even if they're missing work due to illness, let's say that a student misses a whole week because they're sick, technically they're only going to be missing 3 or 4 classes, which would help them catch up a lot faster than if it was a whole week's worth of classes. Now, of course, those classes are a lot longer, but I would be surprised if a teacher would give out twice as much homework. They probably do have a lot to do, a lot of catching up to do at home, but it's going to feel about the same amount of work, but they're going to get there a lot faster because there's not as many days they miss. So another criticism here is the actual learning that's done in the classroom. This is the deep learning, the most important learning. And one criticism is that having these long periods of time off is going to be hard for students to have that information retention. That's kind of the idea of students coming back from spring break, or students coming back from a 3-day weekend, or even a 2-day weekend. It always seems like, why did I do all these lessons before the break? Because you forgot everything. And honestly, it is a good criticism. Some classes might benefit from having a class, there's a class every day. So like I said, the 4x4 block scheduling might be the best way to go if you're worried about retention. They'll still do, every day the same classes, they're just longer classes. But even with that, even if you are wanting to do the AB schedule and you're worried about information retention, having a day off isn't going to be the end of the world. If anything, it might give them time to kind of digest or kind of like think about, really reflect on what they learned. If you give them that option, you could send them homework over, have homework every alternating day. There are ways to get around that. The good things though about if you want to get into really deep learning for your students with block scheduling is that, again, that 90-minute block is going to give your teachers far more time to do actually engaging and cooperating and really meaningful activities than a straight 45-minute block, right? It's that extra time that gives your teachers the time to actually create these like project-based learning experiences, or to create those collaborative learning experiences. It gives the time for the students to actually, have discussions and to bring up, their interests about the subject. So it's not so much about fighting against the clock. It's more about, we've got an hour and a half. Let's make the most of our time and actually use it for really good deep learning. And this is really the biggest thing about the biggest advantage of a block schedule is that it lets you have those moments of deep learning rather than saying, well, we've only got 20 minutes of class. I'd like to do this project. We just don't have enough time. So I'm just going to send you home a worksheet. That doesn't help anybody. So now, of course, usually the linchpin with any decision made for a school, test scores. Is this going to help students' test scores? Is it going to hurt them? Is it actually going to make a big enough change in student scores to warrant all this change in scheduling? Unfortunately, the jury is out on test scores. You can find findings that show that traditional scheduling is much better than block scheduling. You can find ones that say that, oh, block scheduling is far, far better than traditional scheduling. And you can find research that shows that really doesn't make a difference. It's not a magic pill. Block scheduling isn't gonna, if you just implement block scheduling and your teachers just do lectures and they don't do anything new with the time they have, you're probably not gonna get any advantages at a block scheduling. Again, what it is, it's a tool that your teachers can kind of change up the way that they teach. It gives them an advantage in class that they can teach in a way that students are gonna be more interested and they're gonna be more active in the learning process rather than simply, we'll have 45 minutes, with students getting ready and getting into their seats and then they're packing everything up. I've only got like maybe a half hour. All I can do is just, show this PowerPoint. Again, it kind of breaks free of that. Lets teachers really think of engaging ways to get students involved in the classroom. So again, your test scores aren't going to automatically go up just because you have block scheduling. It's what you do with that time that matters. And I really believe that. So conclusion, again, the main three things that are takeaway from block scheduling, in my opinion, that are really powerful is that your students are going to have less time in the halls and more time in the class. Again, counting up even if they have 5 minutes between each class, sometimes students have more, depending on how large your school is. They're missing a lot of time going between all those classes. If you have half the number of classes, they're going to spend much more time in the class than they are outside doing anything else. And that's going to be a lot less disciplinary problems too. That's where all those students really get into trouble, is when they're not, being watched as closely in the classroom. So that really helps there. Another one is easier time to catch up missed work. Either if it's through sickness or if a student is struggling in a class, having more time in class lets a teacher either have one-on-one time with that student or allows student to catch up work much faster because they don't have as many classes that they're missing each week if they do miss any classes. And then finally, more opportunity for deeper learning. Again, it's what the teachers do with those 90 minutes that really matter with block scheduling. That's the thing that really is the most important thing. It gives your teachers a time to not fight against the clock, but it gives them the time to have this freedom to say, okay, we've got 90 minutes. Let's do something that's enjoyable, and let's do something that's actually going to help you learn, rather than just me, writing on a board for 30 or 40 minutes, and then you writing things down. It's really, really important that way. Yeah, so that's the end of my spiel, into my pitch for block scheduling. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions whatsoever about block scheduling, please feel free to email me. I'll be happy to answer any questions you have. And again, I thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and have a wonderful day.